Hey guys, Curious here. In my last video, I tried to make a point about atheism and my naturalist belief in the world. And it was a response to divinity. And now Jakluk has answered that video, and she's talked more about the spiritual journey that divinity also touched upon. And I like to talk about that too, because I have to think back about what it is that kind of brought me to atheism. I'm just going to say atheism, even though in my sense of it, I mean complete naturalism. And by naturalism, I mean naturalistic means. It means not a type of pantheism in touch with nature, although I do agree with that. But it means that the world functions on the rules, the rules of nature and physics. The laws of nature and physics. So, basically, I have to ask myself, what brings people to their views in life? Well, for me, I would say it started with early reading material. I remember having a Disney children's encyclopedia, and it was very visual, and it self-promoted a lot of Disney shows that in turns themselves were based off fairy tales. Now, with my Celtic heritage, that tied into other books I had that hit upon, in part, not just Arthurian legend, but also Greek and other mythology. It was a book series of mythology. And with this, that was kind of my introduction into spirituality beyond my Lutheran upbringing. But at a very early age, I tied mysticism with my religious views, because with the Arthurian stories, they were kind of connected, as the way Christianity blended with the earlier beliefs of spirituality with Celtic paganism. So, that always was connected to me. And I think that stuck with me. But I always enjoyed various fantasy, fiction type of material. Strange. Something rattled that shouldn't have. And from that, I felt that there was more to explore. Well, because it's hard to explain, but the religious aspect never quite made sense to me. And how that related to the world. I had a questioning mind. I wanted to know. I was trying to make sense of it, and I could see even early on that there was self-consistent flaws in it. Or how could that do that? Plus, I had early influences in natural science. I was taken to a lot of children's museums and such things, and yet I couldn't really see the writing on the wall about how these did not mesh. So, I went along with all of this for a while. But then, with all that, I took an interest in other things. As a child, I was a mall rat. Yeah, kind of a mall rat, because I liked books and other things. Secondhand bookstores. Not the kind of malls you see now, but malls, shops, flea markets, especially flea markets. And there, you could get secondhand materials, which were like cheap pulp fiction, adult fiction, and they also add an element of mystery to it for me. So, one thing I discovered was that I also, in my dealing with mythology, liked views on Eastern religion. But Zen seemed too disciplined, and Confucianism seemed too esoteric. It really didn't fit that mysticism I liked, or the mythology that I enjoyed. And so I found Taoism. Taoism is really interesting. I mean, it's a very colorful aspect of belief, and it has a lot of great stories that go with it. So that was very interesting to me, especially the idea of the Tao, because that sort of fit in with various pagan ideas in certain ways. The elements, the idea that things have spirits, the idea that life is connected, sort of like the Force, you know. I think that's where George Lucas got that. In any case, that led me to other types of mysticism. And one very interesting one I found, especially since I went with my grandmother on trips in the summer between school, and I was influenced to a lot of Native American art and mythology also. So there was the idea of Mesoamerican culture in mythology too. That also interests me. For me, more stories. Well, I found a Psychology Today article, because I was also interested in psychology, And one thing that I found that was very interesting was an article about Don Juan, Carlos Castaneda. So, in dutiful fashion, when I finally stumbled upon one of these books I'd get my hands on, off the seller's table it came, and into my private little hoard of collectibles, from which this time had grown into a sizable little library of its own. Everyone in my house had this library of completely out-of-date books, and I was no exception. It was one thing I was encouraged to have. Matter of fact, I have many of those books now. So from that, not only did I have these original books I had, this children's encyclopedia, but now I started collecting things on Eastern religions, Western ideas, Celtic, occult, and Carlos Castaneda, which if you've ever experienced any type of reading of Don Juan books, you realize it's something completely different. There's a whole mythos into itself about it. And depending how you believe, it's what the book Communion was to UFOs is to what Carlos Castaneda is to spiritualism. It was supposed to be real, but there was a lot of it that was just, no one really believed it in academic circles. It just got more and more, fallacies came into it. But at the time, it was very compelling. Well, with several of these philosophies in it, though, it led me more to think about the real world and how perception and reality played in that. And this led me to be more and more dissatisfied as I studied the Bible more closely, and began to see the reactions I got from those views. So in a way, I never really veered away from religion to mysticism because it always had a connection, but away from spiritualism in itself to rationality. I tried to pursue that in an academic way, but unfortunately, I didn't have the knack for it. I didn't quite fit. I didn't have the inclination, I guess you could say. Maybe if I applied, if you apply yourself, you could do anything. But it really wasn't my calling, as much as I wished it was. So that's basically how I went from spiritualism to rationalism. And now, when I talk to people who embrace rationality in one sense, and yet defend spiritualism in another, it's very hard not to remember that journey myself. I mean, it's very easy to fall into magic thinking, but you'll never see a miracle that just comes out of the blue. I mean, when are you going to see something? What the hell? Ah! Ah! Cripe!